Hi everyone, how are you? So today's video is going to be all about the new Maybelline palette. This is the Nudes palette, and I am super excited about this because this is one of the first drugstore palettes that I've seen out there. Occasionally brands come out with a palette, but this is one that I think is going to be very popular. So when I posted this picture on Instagram and Facebook and asked you guys if you wanted to see a video on it, a lot of you replied that you wanted to. This palette I found at my local Wegmans, which is a grocery store for those of you that might not know. For some reason they always have the newest collections, so I found it for $10. I heard some people say that they found it for $12, so I think it might retail in the $10 to $12 range. Some people also found it at their Target, so I would definitely recommend checking there. But I did read online that this is actually going to be part of Maybelline's permanent collection, so even if you can't find it right now, don't stress because they are adding it to their permanent collection, so once it's available everywhere, you'll probably have a chance to be able to pick it up. First of all, the packaging is really nice. I know some people don't care about packaging and some people do, but this packaging is really nice, especially for a drugstore product. There's a slight amount of weight to it, but I like that this is clear right here so you can actually see all of the shades before you purchase it. What I absolutely love about this palette is that on the back it comes with a lot of different suggestions on how to wear the shadows, which is always helpful, especially when it comes to palettes. There are so many colors that sometimes you don't even know where to begin. So on the back they have an option for like 4 different quads. They kind of break it up into 4 different quads or trios or duos. So I think that's really cool because they give you complementary colors that will work well with each other, and they tell you where to place them as well. So I'm not going to focus too much on that. I just really want to get into the swatches and tell you guys about each of the shadows. So this palette does come with 5 matte shades and 7 shimmer shades. So depending on what you prefer, I like that there's a nice mix of matte and shimmer shadow. The first one right here is a really, really gorgeous, unique color. It looks even prettier once you wear it or once you swatch it. It is kind of like a grayish, shimmery white with some really, really pretty reddish, blue, purple shimmer in it. When you look at it in the pan, you don't notice the reddish purple shimmer, but once you actually place it on the skin, there's a really, really gorgeous sheen. It's not incredibly pigmented. If you were to wear it over the Maybelline color tattoos, which I think all of these go extremely well with the Maybelline color tattoos, the colors are complementary. If you were to wear it over one like Too Cool, which is like a lighter base, I think it would be so beautiful. But if you were just going to wear it on its own, I would recommend it as just a highlight color. The second one in here is a really pretty kind of grayish taupey brown color. This is a matte shade, and the pigmentation on this one is actually really, really great. It is on the lighter side, so you're not going to get like a super opaque look, but I think that this matte shadow is pretty creamy and pretty blendable, especially for a matte shade. So I really like this one. One thing about this palette is that the shades in it tend to lean toward the cooler side. So if you're a fan of cool eyeshadows, this might be more for you. There's way, way less warm eyeshadows in here. I think there's only like 4, maybe 5 warm shadows in here, but most of them are cool. So I would say that if you tend to go seasonally with your eyeshadow, this would look so great during the fall and the winter. There are some warm shadows, which I'll get to, but a lot of them are cooler tones. Number 3 is a really, really beautiful color. I usually use this to blend out my shadows, or sometimes I just put it on my brow bone just to make sure there's a lighter color underneath there. It's just a really, really gorgeous kind of peachy skin tone color. I'm not sure if you guys are going to even be able to see it once I swatch it because it's so light. But again, this isn't really one that you're going to be able to wear all over the lid and get like an opaque finish. But I usually use it to help blend out other colors, or I'll just place it as a highlight just to kind of neutralize that area. So the fourth shadow is by far my favorite shadow in the entire palette. It is incredibly pigmented. It is definitely on par with like Urban Decay pigmentation. That was one little swipe of the shadow. I'm actually wearing this one today in my crease, and it's so, so beautiful. It kind of reminds me of Urban Decay Smog, but it's a little bit more on the brown side. If they were all this pigmented, this palette would be insane. They're not quite all this pigmented, but I mean, I'm really, really happy to get one like this. It reminds me of the Maybelline Eye Studios quads as far as the pigmentation goes. The fifth shade in here is kind of similar to the second shade. That's one thing that I want to mention about the palette. It does have a few shades that are very, very similar. At the end of the video, I'll tell you some things that I think would make the palette a little better. This one is really gorgeous as well. This one leans more on the gray side. So I mean, in the pan, it looks a little more gray. When you swatch it on your skin, it's definitely like a gray, brownish taupe. It's super similar to number 2. I feel like they could have made better use of the palette by putting in like a different shade. Again, this one does swatch really nice. It's smooth, it's creamy, it's blendable. I feel like the matte shadows in this palette are really, really nice. The sixth shade in this palette, the last one right here on the first row, is a really beautiful color. Again, this is a matte shade, and it's kind of like a deep charcoal gray color. And I think that this one, again, is super, super pigmented. It's probably one of my favorites along with the one that I mentioned. But when you put it on your skin, it kind of shows more brown. In the pan, it's a little more gray, but the pigmentation is really, really nice. Moving on to the second row, the seventh shadow in this palette is a really pretty brown shimmery color. And this one does swatch nicely as well. The shimmery shades, I feel like, pack a lot of pigmentation, especially if they're on the darker side. And this one is so beautiful. It looks like Bad to the Bronze in an eyeshadow form. The next shadow in this palette is a really, really pretty medium brown. It is a matte shadow, and it's not quite as pigmented as some of the other matte shadows in the palette. It goes on nicely, but it's not, again, as opaque as the other shadows. So I would say this is probably one of my least favorite shadows in the palette, especially because I usually prefer like really warm browns, and I feel like this one leans a little bit on the cooler side. The next shadow was a little disappointing because when you look at it in the pan, it reminded me of Urban Decay's Half Baked, which is one of my favorite shadows, but when you swatch it, it's not quite as pigmented. When you do swatch it, it looks a lot more pigmented than when you actually place it on your eye with a brush. I'm wearing it on my lid today, and it kind of gives you more of like, I would say it looks more like light bronze from the Lorac Pro palette, if you guys know what shade I'm talking about. Rather than a gold, it's kind of like a light whitish gold, if that makes sense. It's a really, really pretty color, but it doesn't look like it does in the pan on your actual eyes. I like to use it in combination with this bronze color up here. So I am wearing that one on my lid today, and it did go on really nicely. It's just not quite as pigmented as I was hoping. The next shade is a really, really beautiful color. I love this shade so much, and in the pan it kind of looks like a reddish kind of brick brown color. When you do wear it on your eyes, it definitely leans more brown, and it's not quite as shimmery as some of the other shimmer shades in the palette. It's so, so beautiful. The next shadow in this palette is a really beautiful, unique color. Again, I don't own anything like this in my entire collection, so it's really gorgeous. In the pan, it kind of looks like a silverish gray color, but when you swatch it, it has almost like a pink glow to it. It's so, so beautiful, and I'm excited to wear this one and play around with it and create some looks. It does work really nicely as an inner corner highlight or a brow bone highlight, but I feel like all over the lid it would look so beautiful if it was paired with the right color. So I really, really like that shadow. The last shadow in this palette is a matte black, and it's really beautiful actually. It's not a super, super dark opaque black, which if you're looking for that type, this one probably isn't going to live up to your expectations, but it's more of a light black shadow. And if you're using it as a liner, I found that when I use a liner brush, it goes on extremely opaque, so it does a great job at that. If you're using it more so to cover your entire lid, you're going to get a little bit more of like a lighter black shade rather than a completely dark midnight opaque black shade, if you know what I'm talking about. So I really like it though. I was using it in the outer corner. I did use it in the outer corner today just to darken it up a little bit, and it blends out really nicely. So if you're looking to add some depth to your look, especially because this palette doesn't come with like a dark brown, this one does work well for that. So my overall thoughts on the palette, I think that for the price, you're getting a good palette. $10 to $12, you honestly can't beat the deal, especially if you get it on sale, because drugstores run sales all the time. I would say that this palette's not quite as great as the Maybelline Eye Studio quads as far as pigmentation. I love those so much, but I would say that the pigmentation is a lot better than their regular quads that they normally have. I'm not the biggest fan of those. I think for $10, if you have $10, $12 to spare, I think you should pick it up and play around with it, especially because there are a lot of beautiful colors in this palette. If you're a matte eyeshadow fan, I think that you're definitely going to love the matte shadows in this palette, and if you're a cool toned eyeshadow lover and a matte eyeshadow fan, this is definitely the palette for you. If you're a warm toned eyeshadow fan like I am, this one might not be the best option for you because there aren't too many warm eyeshadows in this palette, and the warmer eyeshadows aren't always as great as the cooler toned eyeshadows, so I think it really just comes down to personal preference. I'm an eyeshadow lover. Every single day I love to try new eyeshadow looks, usually neutral looks, so this palette does work really well for me because there are a lot of great neutral shadows in it. I would say as a whole, there aren't a ton of looks that I'm going to be able to create with just this palette alone because it's missing a couple of key colors. It's missing a warm kind of transition color. I also feel like it's missing a deep warm toned brown. I think that everyone gets use out of warm toned browns, especially in the crease, and it doesn't seem to have that. It has this one brown, but but I feel like it leans more on the cooler tone side than the warmer tone side. But really, for $10 to $12, I think that you can't beat it, especially because I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of it. During the fall and the winter, I'll probably use it a little bit more when I change up my makeup look, but I think that it's a great palette to have, and I love that they went ahead and did a palette. I hope that after Maybelline did this palette, other drugstores will follow suit and try palettes, and that Maybelline will release more palettes. Leave me a comment down below letting me know if you guys are going to pick up this palette. If you would like to see a review on any other products, let me know and I can definitely do it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.